A company with $48 billion in annual revenue doesn't just go dark. Yet in early July 2025, Ingram Micro systems went down, its website vanished, and employees were told to work from home. The digital spine of a global supply chain had snapped. Security reporting later attributed the incident to the SafePay ransomware group. But this wasn't just about a ransom. Secondary breach reporting says employee/applicant records were affected, while SafePay claimed data theft. The attack underscored a brutal reality: perimeter defenses alone weren't enough. So how did the attackers bypass the perimeter to not only cripple operations, but also access the company's most sensitive HR data? The vulnerability wasn't at the gates. It was hidden deep within the very digital connections that had made the company a global power in the first place. That hidden vulnerability wasn't an accident. It was a direct consequence of how Ingram Micro was built and why it worked so well. To understand the breach, you first have to understand the machine that was broken. This was not a retailer. It was the central nervous system of the global technology supply chain, a logistical colossus processing annual revenues between $48 billion and $54 billion. Manufacturers like Microsoft and Cisco moved through its distribution channels to a vast, diversified network of resellers and system integrators worldwide. Orders, inventory levels, shipping manifests, invoices, all of it, moving at machine speed, every second of every day. And Ingram Micro didn't just stumble into that role. It engineered it. The company's entire reason for existing was integration, being the connective tissue between people who build technology and people who sell it. The company built out its Xvantage platform, including the Xvantage Integrations Hub, letting partners integrate directly into its logistics and finance systems. The result was a highly automated ecosystem, transactions executed with minimal human intervention. For partners, it was a critical efficiency gain. For Ingram Micro, it was the engine of dominance, a deeply embedded, indispensable layer in the global tech economy. But here's the paradox. Their infrastructure was less a fortress and more a sprawling, interconnected city of data, humming, self-organizing, and immense. That architecture was conceived in an era when the primary cyber threat was a stranger banging on the front door. So Ingram Micro optimized accordingly. Firewalls, intrusion detection, access controls. Everything designed to keep outsiders out. Inside the walls, though, the assumption was trust. The countless digital handshakes tying the ecosystem together had long been treated as passive procurement plumbing. Greyhound research would later urge CISOs to elevate intermediaries like IT distributors from passive procurement partners to strategic threat vectors. The system was optimized for integration and fulfillment at a massive scale. But its defenses were never designed for an enemy who might already be inside, riding the same pathways that made the company powerful in the first place. And that is exactly the door the attackers would walk through. Ingram Micro stood at its zenith. The company reported $52.6 billion in net sales for fiscal year 2025, a figure that wasn't just a record, but a monument to operational dominance. This was the direct output of its sprawling, interconnected ecosystem. A vast, diversified network, resellers, managed service providers, enterprise customers, depended on the constant flow of Ingram Micro's systems. The machine was running at maximum capacity. The assumption was that this scale equated to unshakable resilience, that a company this embedded was too vital to be disrupted. But inside that engine, the attackers claimed misconfigurations had quietly opened doors. Decades of growth had woven a tangled web of digital connections. SafePay claimed Ingram Micro made critical mistakes in securing its corporate network, specifically citing misconfiguration. The security approach leaned heavily on perimeter defense, fortifying the castle's outer walls. The vast, interdependent traffic flowing between integrated systems, the very lifeblood of the business, was treated as trusted internal dialogue. But the attackers weren't coming for the gates. The network held overlooked gaps, not a threat vector. SafePay claimed those misconfigurations left the door wide open. Over 42,000 individuals had their records affected. Ransomware was identified on certain internal systems, and Ingram Micro proactively took systems offline, triggering a widespread outage. On July 3, 2025, the attackers made their move. not with a battering ram against Ingram Micro's firewalls, but through a quiet side entrance. Security teams would later determine the initial access leveraged unmonitored integration credentials, likely belonging to a partner system. The exact vector remained murky, but the same digital handshakes that powered a $48 billion a year supply chain had become the pipeline for its compromise. The attackers hadn't outsmarted the defenses, they'd simply walked in through the door marked "Trusted." Once inside, they were beyond the perimeter entirely, landing directly within the company's internal file repositories, wrapped in a high degree of assumed trust. From there, the group executed a textbook double extortion play, but here's what made it surgical. Encryption was not their first move. Reported data theft was the extortion claim. Over a matter of hours, they siphoned files at will. The ransomware gang, tied to the name SafePay, would later claim to have stolen massive volumes of corporate data. Employment records, applicant files, the personal information of over 42,000 employees and job applicants, names, dates of birth, social security numbers, the kind of data you can't patch, can't reset, can't take back. Only after SafePay claimed data theft, their leverage locked away, did the attackers deploy the encryption malware. In response, the company took critical systems offline. The ability to process and ship orders ground to a halt. The internal damage was catastrophic, but the crisis was about to shift terrain entirely, from servers to boardrooms. Because the breach had been discovered, the data had been stolen, and the systems were locked. The question that now haunted the C-suite was not how to recover, but when to tell the world. The technical crisis was over. The corporate fallout was just beginning. A year's silence had passed between the breach and the world learning of it. News of the July 3, 2025 ransomware attack drew sharp scrutiny, and the market's judgment was swift. On July 2, 2026, Ingram Micro stock fell 5.63%. The drop erased significant shareholder value. A direct financial penalty, not for the hack, but for the handling of it. The damage was no longer confined to encrypted servers. It was now priced into the company's public valuation. Simultaneously, the human cost materialized. Breach notifications were sent to over 42,000 employees and job applicants whose personal data was compromised. Names, dates of birth, social security numbers, the kind of data that fuels years of anxiety. The company offered 24 months of free credit monitoring and identity protection services, raising the specter of class action lawsuits. The operational disruption cascaded outward. Downstream partners, whose businesses were built on deep integration with Ingram Micro's platforms, faced cascading disruptions, shipment delays, backlogs, and inability to place orders, as Ingram Micro's systems went dark. A domino effect rippling through the $48 billion supply chain. The incident exposed the systemic risk of dependency concentration. The company's failure was now their partner's crisis. The initial breach was a technical problem. The delayed disclosure transformed it into a far more damaging crisis of trust. The technical lesson was clear, but the strategic blind spot ran deeper. So what broke? Not a firewall. Not a single overlooked patch. What broke was a fundamental assumption. That in a deeply interconnected ecosystem, you can draw a clear line between inside and outside. You can't. The perimeter is an illusion. Resilience isn't built by stacking higher walls. It's built by securing the countless digital handshakes that make modern commerce possible. That demands a shift, from a model of perimeter trust to one of continuous verification. Two principles emerge. First, comprehensive visibility. Every API, every partner integration, every legacy system connection, treat each one as a potential threat vector. Dependency mapping cannot stop at the network edge. It must extend outward into the ecosystems of your suppliers and your customers, identifying points of concentration risk before an attacker does. Because automated attackers don't knock, they scan. Second, integrated response. Incident response plans must evolve beyond technical containment. They need pre-vetted, rapid disclosure strategies aligned with regulatory and market expectations. The financial and reputational damage from a delayed or poorly communicated disclosure, as Ingram Micro learned, can far exceed the initial impact of the breach itself. Silence doesn't buy time, it buys suspicion. The central lesson is this: trust must be an engineered, audited property of a system, not a default assumption. In a $48 billion supply chain, blind trust is the most expensive vulnerability on the balance sheet. Before we conclude, this analysis is educational only and does not provide intrusion guides. If this breakdown offered a clear strategic framework, we appreciate that feedback. What is the single greatest unmonitored risk in modern supply chain security? Legacy system integration, or third-party credential management? Share your analysis in the comments. If this breach analysis of Ingram Micro's 42,000 records compromised helped you understand the vulnerability, a like helps us reach more curious minds. What do you think is the most critical lesson from this attack? Drop your take in the comments.